told the public very clearly from the beginning that we believe it was a targeted attack. I mean, to be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point, because we're not going to release why we think that. Because we're not going to release why we think that.
What a large flashlight you have. The better to see you with, my dear. Sensitive topics about real-life events including violence, drug addiction, and other crimes, and it may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion strongly advised.
Your birthday today. Probably not what you want to be doing on your birthday, huh? Alright. 2 felonies of deliveries since they took place on campus, both of them. They're enhanced, so they're Class A felonies. 20 years in prison, $20,000 fine. Okay. That's probably not a way to start off your young adult life and your career, right? So, what I'm going to ask for you to do is to do some buys for me then. Okay, where you'd have to wear a wire, you'd have to go buy marijuana from individuals, and then depending upon how you do and so forth, a lot of this could go away. Individuals that you know on campus or around town or whatever that you can buy from?
There's one chick that sells out of the campus apartments that I know of.
Who's that?
I'm not sure the name, but I have quite a few buddies that buy from her.
Okay, who are those buddies?
Well, just
How much can you get from him?
you can get quite a bit,
What's quite a bit?
like 2-3 ounces at a time.
Okay.
Well, it ain't always easy to illuminate the truth in these shadows, but eventually we're hoping that justice and truth come forward for the Idaho 4 victims, and we hope that those truths are illuminated as vividly as Xana was, by the maglight of the officers, and that the truth no longer be hidden, like the officers outside of the victim's residence previous to the crime. In that endeavor, I brought you more student informant info, and we're gonna jump off with the WSU case that happens to be quite ancient. I think it started in 2006, the early 2000s, but guess what? Drug Enforcement Task Force ain't changed much. The equipment has changed a bit, the guidelines here and there change, but the game, well, it always stays the same.
The Quad City Task Force operates in Moscow, Pullman, Lewiston, and other relevant areas in the region. This includes the involvement of campus authorities from Washington State University and the University of Idaho. The task force manages substance trafficking, are known for leveraging student informants, and conducts controlled buys and undercover investigations. Many of these operations, particularly those near local landmarks like the Grub Truck, have been featured in the news. While the task force includes several different agencies, the ones pertinent to this episode are the Moscow Police Department, Pullman Police Department, Lewiston Police Department, Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, Latah County Sheriff's Office, and the campus police departments of the mentioned universities. Their core mission is to identify and initiate prosecution against individuals involved in the consumption, distribution, manufacturing, possession, and sale of controlled substances.
In this WSU case was woven the threads of a shadowy drug culture within WSU. The narrative unfolded within the confines of its walls and within its resident homes. Beyond the controlled buy was the fraternity's drug culture, which apparently was permeating the social fabric at that time, even 15 years ago. The case went on with appeals and many legal implications, and we happened to get a peek into that, and it's sort of rare to get to see these things because it would never be in the police reports. Or at least we wouldn't be able to see those police reports. Correction. Now, a fraternity known as AKL, Alpha Kappa Lambda? Did I say that right? I don't know. But AKL found itself entangled in a web of controversy. It was spun during a multiple-year investigation by Palouse drug detectives, the Quad Cities Task Force. And the focal point of the investigation was Christopher Smith, a figure colloquially known as Smitty. Despite not being a WSU student, Smitty was deemed an honorary AKL, and according to police reports, a prominent source of cocaine within certain circles of the Greek system at WSU. These activities came to light during a controlled buy. We can see an establishment of this system of using students to catch criminals with campus authorities being involved and on and off of the universities for over 20 years. Did I say that already? Oh yeah, because it's a legal saga that has unfolded time and time again, but that people still like to pretend doesn't exist. Well, Smitty's activities led to this whole hoopla about WSU's Student Conduct Board and their ultimate punishment by being suspended through the university. Their recognition was completely removed. That conduct board asserted that the university's responsibility for charges such as allowing drugs to be sold on their chapter property and the use, possession, and distribution of drugs by members and chapters' offices warranted that discipline. It was a 5-year withdrawal, meaning that all freshmen in that fraternity had to relocate. And it would be 5 years before the fraternity was able to conduct activities on the WSU campus. The narrative extends far beyond this and is still relevant to this particular theory pertaining to the Idaho 4. You see, AKL through its representatives contended that the House swiftly expelled the individuals involved in illicit drug activities. They noted they did this before WSU even became aware of the cases. The fraternity's defense painted a picture of a House taking proactive measures to distance itself from the alleged wrongdoings. But in the backdrop of this story, the Quad City Drug Task Force said that drug use there and through this fraternity was pervasive among current and former members. Their off-campus residences, including one ominously named The Joint, became a hub for illegal activities. The arrest reports detailing drug transactions, theft, and witness intimidation. The AKL case, unique in scale, prompted a clash between the fraternity and the university admins. AKL contested the disciplinary process, lacked due process rights, and they claimed to be blindsided by the conduct board hearing. The legal tussle culminated in an appeal and ultimately a petition for review filed with the Whitman County Superior Court. BB, the fraternity's new member educator. This is a central spot and a central figure in the hierarchy within the fraternity. And according to their narrative, he was dealing not just drugs, but in a subtle influence that shaped the fraternity's dynamics. His role went beyond that of mere supplier. He became a puppeteer, orchestrating the movements of the fraternity members. Those movements culminated in an intricate dance of drug distribution. The drug culture within the fraternity extended its tendrils into the highest echelons of leadership. Officers, including the risk manager, the CH, the live-in advisor, NH, and the social chair, ES, were not mere bystanders but active participants, condoning and even partaking in the activities, and fueled the fraternity's underbelly as a whole. The practices, or lack thereof, became contributing factors to a pervasive drug culture, and the absence of clear policies on the drugs and alcohol left newer members in the dark, and the person responsible for educating them, BB, ironically being a drug dealer himself, failed to rectify that. The conduct board's scrutiny claimed that there were instances where drugs were actively promoted, and the web of connections between members involved drug-related incidents that weren't isolated but woven into the tapestry. Now, this controlled buy became a focal point of the legal debate and a point of intense scrutiny. In the intricate dance, each participant had a distinct role, including guards that stood by the door and played human barrier shield that helped ensure a smooth exchange to help ease the role of the drug facilitators. These guards, stationed strategically near the doors, played a critical role in the clandestine nature of this fraternity's dealings and was detailed in the paperwork. As BB engaged in the transactions, the guards acted as protectors and obstructors, and their presence symbolized that code of silence, a collective effort to shield the inner network from external scrutiny. The guards were intended to create a buffer zone. Now, Detective Patrick, a key task force player and a key figure in the legal proceedings, revealed that members and informants of AKL bought drugs and many controlled buys from BB. This revelation and the detective's testimony was the linchpin in the case. Without these controlled buys, law enforcement would have never been able to prove any critical pieces of evidence against BB, and by extension against AKL. These controlled buys serve as first-hand accounts of drug transactions and a tangible link between the fraternities, the illegal activities, and the illicit dealer. AKL argued that the controlled buy rooted in information from the confidential informants lacked credibility. However, the court, guided by the standards and the admin procedure at the time, acknowledged the admissibility of this type of hearsay evidence and the student conduct proceedings. In other words, these controlled buys were deemed completely reliable by the conduct board. Now, amidst this whole labyrinth of legal troubles, the physical spaces that house these alleged transgressions emerged as crucial elements. These residences were where the members lived and conducted illegal activities. Additionally, its annex, an extension to the AKL residence, played a notable role in the storyline. It was at the annex that an armed robbery allegedly occurred during a multi-pound marijuana deal. And of course, it added another layer of charges against the fraternity. The paperwork claims that these AKL houses and annexes were not just physical structures, but symbolic representations of the culture, drug use, and distribution from within. So after my last episode, I was still getting questions like, NEEKS, would they tell the parents that they were involved in this? Well, no, they won't. They won't tell anyone. And in fact, kids and young adults are instructed not to tell anyone.
And that you will not use your association with the BCI to resolve your personal problems. Now, with that is basically, if you get jammed up in trouble with the police or anything, don't tell any law enforcement officers that you are associated with me, okay? At the time, whatever you did, take your lumps and then you call me afterwards, okay? And then we'll work it out. Not that we don't trust cops, it's just you're not gonna throw that card out there. On the second token is, you can't tell anybody you're working for me, for obvious reasons. Not even, you try not to tell your roommate, anybody, because the more people that know, if that word gets out, you know as well as I do, people are gonna think you're a narc, nobody's gonna work with you. I mean, nobody will touch you. Of course, if you can't buy dope, you're not getting to me, okay? You understand that?
They're also not read their rights because they're not actually under arrest in many circumstances. The threat is that if they don't become a CI, subsequent charges from evidence already collected against them then would go through in the court system, leading to an arrest, which would ultimately leave the police informing that suspect of their rights. But in these cases, many times they're not under arrest and therefore are not informed of their right to an attorney.
You right now, because you're working off charges, but let's say we get done where your charges are worked off type deal, and let's say a few more people and you want to go buy and make some cash, it's you can make some pretty good cash, and I'd be willing to pay you for that if you want to entertain that idea later. You go buy some marijuana, if it takes you 5 minutes, you'll get paid $100 to do a deal. If you go buy meth, pills, whatever, you get paid $200. So quick, easy cash. If you want, after you work off deals, you know some more people if you want to make money. It's just that we don't give you a W-2 at the end of the year. You understand that?
Okay.
Which in many cases can make everything completely different. A part of what makes the job so difficult, dangerous, and ethically incomprehensible is because often the kids are turned into informants over insignificant amounts of drugs and marijuana, and then police turn around and use them to catch dangerous criminals, as is the case with Rachel Hoffman. Rachel Hoffman got into the informant work over weed, and inevitably they had her catching criminals that were outside of her county, which is inherently dangerous, or especially more dangerous even than catching criminals in her own county. And they also had her working cases that had nothing to do with drugs that she was even caught with.
Rachel Hoffman, a young woman under drug court supervision, was discovered with 25 grams. That's 0.9 ounces of cannabis during a traffic stop on February 22, 2007. Approximately a year later, on April 17, 2008, the Tallahassee Police Department conducted a search of her apartment, uncovering an additional 5 ounces of cannabis and 4 ecstasy pills. Facing a potential prison sentence and criminal charges related to the discovered drugs, the police attempted to persuade Rachel to identify other marijuana dealers to avoid the repercussions. However, Rachel staunchly refused to involve people from her own network. As a result, the police pressured her into serving as a confidential informant in a high-stakes drug sting operation. This operation required her to purchase 1,500 ecstasy pills, 2 ounces of cocaine, and 2 handguns, using $13,000 cash in a buy-bust operation. This plan was not only contrary to department policy, but was also described by her family as extremely out of character for Rachel. In a twist of events, the 2 suspects decided to change the location of the buy. This is where things took a turn for the worse. Rachel, who was unable to receive the instructions from her handlers due to a faulty wire they had installed, agreed to the suspects' plan to change the location. They left together in their stolen silver BMW. Instead of calling off the operation due to the unexpected change in plan, Rachel's handlers allegedly lost track of her. Sadly, this Florida State graduate was on the verge of leaving Tallahassee, her newly earned degree in hand, bound for culinary school in Arizona. To move forward and put her own marijuana arrest behind her, all she had to do was assist the police in busting 2 drug dealers. They assured her it would be a straightforward task. Despite being the largest buy-bust operation in the department's history with 18 officers involved in Pender's direct supervision, the situation took a horrifying turn. Within a few short minutes, gunshots echoed on the dead-end Gardner Road. The result was tragic. Her body was discovered 36 hours later in a culvert off a remote dirt road in Taylor County.
As you can see, that also happened to poor Andrew as well, who was talked into his informant work on his birthday and over $80 of marijuana. No joke. Now, his parents were not informed, even when he was considered a missing person. His family pleaded on the news for his safe return. And police, completely willing to help out with this, well, they went forward with the charges that they originally threatened Andrew with, in an attempt to get him to come back and turn himself in, but without ever confiding in his confidential informant work. It was discovered through investigative journalists who informed Andrew's parents. Now, after being missing for 2 months, the 20-year-old North Dakota State College of Science student was found dead. His body was recovered in Red River in a dive completely unrelated to his death. Now, this was significant and notable because this town, much like Moscow, was particularly noteworthy and known for its safety and its extremely low crime rates. Now, after the disturbing revelation came to light, his parents were stunned to learn that police were using students as bait in their efforts to apprehend dangerous drug dealers. Only recently was their case thrown out yet again. North Dakota refuses to hold the police force accountable, claiming that there is no evidence to actually connect their mishandling of their informant to his death. But the police the entire time forced a narrative that Andrew was merely bummed out about his confidential informant work and that this furthered his psychological downfall, culminating in a suicide. His parents, however, did not ever believe the suicide narrative, as well as the gun was never recovered. Andrew, who was weighted down by rocks in his backpack, had parents who steadfastly believe, were he not used as bait by the police force and through the university for not being contacted, they blamed their son's death on that contract alone.
Andrew Sadek's tragic demise was initially deemed as suicide by police, the theory being that he was overwhelmed by his role as a confidential informant. His mother confirmed that a family-owned gun was missing at the time of his death. The suicide theory, however, was called into question due to various factors. Despite a gunshot wound to the head, no weapon was discovered near his body in the river, even after multiple searches. His backpack was strangely filled with rocks. Sadek was last seen on security footage leaving his dorm wearing a Tampa Bay Buccaneers hoodie, but his body was discovered in a different, heavier jacket, which was not seen in the footage. Further adding to the mystery, his wallet was missing, requiring identification through dental records. Tammy Sadek, Andrew's mother, reported that she was informed of 3 individuals seen cleaning a car, similar to Andrew's, late that night in the parking lot. Unfortunately, the security camera overseeing that area was non-functional. The Sadeks revealed at the end of 2014 that when Andrew's car was returned to them post his disappearance, The carpet was thoroughly wet, with several inches of water accumulated in the spare tire well in the trunk. This could suggest that the car had been driven down a boat launch, with one located near the river not far from campus. These perplexing circumstances open up the disturbing possibility that there may have been some form of police involvement, likely indirect. This is not a theory to be thrown around lightly, but it cannot be ruled out in this case. Oddly, Sadek left his dorm with his phone turned off. Usually, if one is going out on an undercover buy for the police, the phone would be kept on for evidentiary purposes and to communicate with the dealer. Any texts or calls would only strengthen the case against the dealer. The non-working security camera in the parking lot is another suspicious detail. Could a dealer have known about the faulty camera? Unlikely. But the police. The Sadeks were surprised at the speed and lack of thorough investigation with which the police were ready to declare the death a suicide, despite the facts suggesting otherwise. Tammy Sadek reported asking the police multiple times to search the Red River after her son's disappearance. They promised to do so after its spring flood stage receded, which happened by early June, a month after Andrew was last seen. However, they never followed through, leaving a training mission to accidentally discover the body. If the body was dumped in the river, weighted down when it was higher, it may indicate that the perpetrator underestimated the likelihood of the body being discovered when the water receded. Alternatively, they might have hoped that the body, despite the rocks, would be carried downstream to a less accessible point. The missing wallet could have delayed identification, possibly rendering him a John Doe if carried far enough downstream. It seems likely that whoever disposed of the body, and possibly the murderer, wanted to distance themselves from this crime as much as possible. They aimed for this to remain a missing person case for as long as possible, if not indefinitely.
Ask for you to do is to do some buys for me then. Okay, where you'd have to wear a wire, you'd have to go buy marijuana from individuals, and then, depending upon how you do and so forth, a lot of this could go away. Is it all gonna go away? Probably not. Are you gonna probably have to plead guilty to like maybe a misdemeanor possession of marijuana? Probably, but at least you're not pleading guilty to felonies. Okay, is that fair enough?
Very fair.
Okay. Is there individuals that you know on campus or around town or whatever that you can buy from?
The tragic death of 23-year-old Rachel Hoffman came directly after her undercover drug sting, a controlled buy that was obviously botched. One of the earliest students to have hit headlines with this in May 2008, it remains a cautionary tale. She was a recent graduate of Florida State University with a promising future, before being coerced into becoming a confidential informant for the Tallahassee Police Department. This was after a raid where police found marijuana in her apartment. Unfortunately, due to police negligence, she was murdered execution style by the drug dealer she was sent to engage with undercover. Hoffman's case drew national attention and raised significant questions about law enforcement practices, but obviously, recent deaths have shown that there is a lot of room for improvement and that much of these operations are still completely ignited and carried out without much safety protocol and completely in the dark. Many parents complaining that they were never notified of their child's possible drug addiction or encounter with police at all. The decision by the Tallahassee Police Department to involve Rachel Hoffman in an extremely perilous operation marked a turn for tragic events. In her first role, Rachel was tasked with purchasing 1,500 ecstasy pills, 2 ounces of cocaine, and a handgun from 2 individuals identified by the police as dangerous drug dealers. Shockingly, she was provided $13,000 in cash for this high-stakes operation. Now, with no training, preparation, and basically no safety measures afforded to Rachel, the police failed to equip her with defensive gear, coaching, and of course, she had a clear absence of qualifications and experience. It seems like a pretty obvious unrealistic expectation to us, but there they went, thinking she could single-handedly apprehend these 2 armed and seasoned drug traffickers. Rachel embarked on this ill-fated drug buy operation, and it would ultimately claim her life. Sent alone, unequipped, she was tasked with meeting the men, and officers planned to monitor the event carried out in public from a distance. But the dark twist happens when she met the dealers. The dealers had no intention of fulfilling the drug exchange. Instead, they planned to rob her. In a wooded area, the dealers seized the $13,000 in cash and never provided the promised gun or drugs in exchange. They shot Rachel execution style. The police surveillance team claims to have lost sight of Rachel, a failure that proved fatal. Unaware of the peril she faced, and in a shocking, dire lapse of protection for their informant, the police called off the operation for the night after waiting a couple of hours. Her body was discovered 2 days later when a tip led investigators to a remote crime scene. In response to their daughter's murder, Rachel's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit. In 2012, the lawsuit was settled for $2.6 million. Although the Hoffman family maintained their pursuit of justice and maintained that it was about accountability rather than monetary compensation. In-depth investigations into Rachel Hoffman's death revealed significant errors and policy violations by the Tallahassee Police Department. They were considered to have largely contributed to the tragic outcome. This prompted demands for change and resulted in Rachel's Law. This mandated new guidelines and training for police departments utilizing CIs. But the family realized, and we should realize, that today, significant and federal mandates need to be a part of this pursuit for Rachel and other young and old victims who are taken advantage of and ultimately lose their lives so that they can do police work for the police. Separate juries convicted Bradshaw and Green, sentencing each to life in prison without parole. The heart-wrenching account of Troy Howlett's tragic fate, as narrated by his mother Donna Watson.
Lucky teen and star athlete became addicted to pain medication after being run over by a car in high school.
It was the beginning to the end. It really was. At the time, I was going to do everything in my power, and I did, until I finally learned that I can't do it. He's got to do it.
Donna said her son, who was in and out of trouble due to his addiction, thought that opportunity came when he was revived after overdosing in the spring of 2018. She said the Hopewell police made him an offer at his bedside in the hospital.
They proceed to tell him, say, well, you have two choices. You can sit your probation out in jail, or you can be an informant for us.
That's not a real choice. It's almost a coerced situation.
Former FBI special agent turned professor Luke Hunt.
Yeah, I think informants are vital.
But he says individuals like Troy are not good candidates.
By putting someone in a situation in which their life is at serious risk, either through being harmed in an operation where they're buying or selling drugs, or by relapsing, which could of course be deadly like in this case, it seems like there's no other way around it that you have weighed the enforcement of a drug law over or greater than the value of the informant's life and well-being.
CBS 6 obtained text messages purportedly between Troy and the Hopewell detective he was working with undercover. They show Troy failed his drug tests at least 3 times in between his undercover operations of controlled buys of illegal drugs. Yet the officer assured him he was, quote, good to go, to which Troy replied, okay, I will not mess up again.
My son was crying out for help. They should have taken him off. They put my son in harm's way.
So when you are warned that an informant is not doing what they agreed to do and they're relapsing, in my opinion, that is no longer a viable relationship between the informant and the source in an operational way. Because you can't control what the informant's doing, and you're basically putting them in a situation that you know is untenable.
The Hopewell Police Department denied CBS 6's Freedom of Information request for records pertaining to Troy Howell, citing privacy protections, but provided us with the department's policy and guidelines on informants, which states a confidential file will be created on the informant and they will be issued a number. Yet text communication between Troy and the Hopewell officer from June 5th, 2018 stated, quote, I told my attorney of the work I am doing for you, and he said the Commonwealth didn't have any knowledge of it. However, on May 1st, the month prior, the detective had assured him he had been, quote, approved by the CA to work. The informant policy also states when funds are provided by the department for a controlled purchase, the officer shall have the informant, quote, sign the Hopewell Police Department receipt for information and/or evidence form. Yet Watson says she was told by the department there were no records of any of her son's sales. However, she does have this final text message acknowledging a relationship between her son and the HPD when she informed them of Troy's death. 8:47 a.m., July 31st, 2018, quote, "We are so sorry for your loss. We were doing everything in our power to help him get the court mess behind him. He was working extremely hard with us, and we are so sad about this news."
I know I am powerless over my bad habits and that my life is unmanageable.
The days leading up to Troy's death
Like I finally get over pills and now I have a problem with Xanax.
were also well documented daily in his spiritual journal.
I'm praying in the name of Jesus Christ to take these addictions away from me.
They will come alive on the big screen in a movie being planned called Hope in the Dark.
We want to make this movie to help as many people. It's going to be for not only people going through what my son had gone through, but people that are in recovery, people that have never even tried drugs to not do it.
So that one less parent
Yeah, he was a cool kid.